Baalbek has defied logic for thousands of years. Its stones are heavier than modern cranes can lift, yet they were placed with impossible precision long before recorded history. For generations, scholars argued over who built them, gods, giants, or something no one can explain. But when scientists finally uncovered what those stones were hiding, the real mystery of Baalbek came into focus. And what they found beneath the temple is something the world was never supposed to see. The discovery that shook Lebanon. Baalbek is one of the most mysterious ancient sites on Earth. It stands in the Be'a Valley of Lebanon, 85 kilometers northeast of Beirut. Even after thousands of years, its massive columns still rise into the sky, casting long shadows over the valley. The Temple of Jupiter, the largest of the complex, remains a masterpiece of engineering. Enormous stone blocks stacked with precision that continues to puzzle modern builders. It is a place that commands respect and curiosity. During a recent restoration effort on the temple floor, a group of archaeologists made a discovery that no one expected. While stabilizing a cracked section near the inner sanctuary, one of the stone panels gave way, revealing a narrow opening beneath. When they cleared the debris, they saw the entrance to a sealed corridor that appeared nowhere on any historical plan or map of Baalbek. Inside the passage, the air was cold and dry. The walls were made of limestone blocks so perfectly fitted that no mortar lines could be seen. Each surface shone under flashlight beams as if it had been polished like glass. The team called in specialists to document the find. As word spread, the site was surrounded by equipment and reporters. Within days, international teams from Germany, France, and the United States arrived, eager to examine what they called an impossible structure. Drones scanned the area, while archaeologists photographed every inch of the passage. Early reports suggested the construction methods used in this corridor were unlike anything known from Roman or Phoenician times. The deeper they explored, the stranger it became. Carvings lined the corridor walls, but none matched Latin, Greek, or any ancient script previously identified in the region. Some of the markings repeated in geometric patterns, almost as if following a formula. The discovery divided the research teams. Some believed the markings were decorative. Others argued they might belong to a culture predating recorded history. Then, the instruments picked up something even more unusual, a hollow chamber directly beneath the sanctuary about 30 meters below the surface. Ground-penetrating radar showed that the space was symmetrical and aligned with the temple's foundations. Engineers warned that continued drilling might damage the structure, but the data hinted that the chamber had been intentionally sealed. Soon after, the Lebanese Directorate of Antiquities halted all public visits to Baalbek. Officially, the closure was for safety. Unofficially, rumors spread that the ground beneath the temple was cursed. What began as a simple restoration had become a classified investigation watched by scientists, governments, and those who feared what might be buried beneath the stones of Lebanon. As excavation continued under heavy secrecy, a new question began to form. Who built Baalbek before Rome ever reached it?
A civilization out of place. Every theory that emerged was more unbelievable than the last. Baalbek, as we know from the archaeological evidence, must have existed during the period between 6,000 to 8,000 years or even 9,000 years BC. Some historians pointed to the Phoenicians, claiming the site once served as a temple to Baal, the storm god who was said to fasten the heavens to the earth. Ancient texts described his dwelling as a fortress built from stones that hum with thunder. It was easy to dismiss such stories as myth until the scientists realized that the carvings around Baalbek's base had once been struck by lightning again and again, as if the entire plateau had been charged with energy. Others turned to even older traditions. In early Canaanite writings, Baal was not alone. He was accompanied by the Watchers, divine builders who descended from the stars and raised foundations that could never fall. Later legends transformed them into giants, punished for revealing forbidden knowledge to humankind. The debate grew intense. Were these stories echoes of an advanced ancient civilization remembered as gods by the people who came after them? Or had myth and science just collided by coincidence in the same patch of earth? As the arguments continued, the researchers turned back to their work, determined to separate belief from fact. Once the corridor was secured, the team began working deeper into the lower layers of the site. The goal was to understand how far the foundation extended beneath the Roman temple. What they uncovered, however, did not fit any part of Baalbek's recorded history. Buried between the limestone blocks was a layer of compacted soil that held fragments of wood and charcoal. When the samples were tested, the results stunned the researchers. The radiocarbon dates came back as several thousand years older than the Roman period. That meant human activity had taken place at Baalbek long before the first Roman column was ever raised. At first, the team suspected contamination or error, but repeat testing produced the same results. The finding forced a re-evaluation of the site's timeline. It suggested that the Romans might have built their grand temple over an even older structure. Quiet discussions began among the experts. Some archaeologists argued it could have been a much earlier Phoenician sanctuary. Others believed it was evidence of a civilization still unknown to history. As the team cleaned the lowest section of the temple, the difference became clear. The upper stones were unmistakably Roman. Their chisel lines were sharp and even, showing the familiar marks of iron tools. But the stones beneath them looked completely different. The cuts were wide and smooth, with edges that appeared melted rather than carved. Under magnification, the limestone surface looked fused together, as if shaped by intense heat or pressure instead of hammer and chisel. The texture was glossy, almost glass-like in places. No known ancient method could have produced such an effect. As the excavations deepened, archaeologists began noticing symbols etched into several base stones. The markings were simple but deliberate, arranged in repeating patterns. Some researchers suggested they were construction guides, while others saw mathematical logic in their spacing. None matched Latin or Greek forms. The more they studied the stones, the clearer it became that two completely different technologies had touched this site, one Roman and one belonging to something far older. Among the team, a quiet name began to circulate. They called the unknown builders the first architects. The title was informal, yet it carried weight. It acknowledged what the evidence suggested, but no one was ready to say aloud, that Baalbek's foundation might have been laid by a forgotten civilization. Then, as workers cleared soil along the deepest edge of the trench, a trowel struck something unexpected. It wasn't stone, it was curved, pale, and fragile. The site fell silent as brushes replaced tools. Within minutes, the shape of a human skull emerged from the earth, buried in a layer that should have been older than any human presence at all.
The builders who never left. When the human remains were first uncovered, no one knew who they belonged to. The bones were found pressed against the quarry wall, twisted among fragments of stone. Some lay face down, others half buried under debris. There were no signs of ritual placement or organized burial. Whatever had happened here was sudden and violent. As more of the site was exposed, the picture became clearer. Tools lay scattered beside the bodies, stone mallets, copper chisels, and shattered measuring rods. It soon became evident that these people had been laborers caught in the middle of their work. When disaster struck, the excavation team began referring to them as the quarry workers who never made it out. According to early lab reports, faint metallic residue was found on the hands and wrists of multiple skeletons. The residue did not correspond to copper or bronze, but to a high-grade alloy rarely seen in ancient artifacts. Some researchers speculated that it came from advanced cutting or shaping instruments. Although no such tools were recovered, forensic specialists studied the bones and found clear signs of repetitive stress. The shoulder joints and lower spines showed wear consistent with heavy lifting and pulling. Many ribs were deformed from long-term strain, and both male and female remains displayed the same pattern of compression injuries. Whoever these people were, they had performed intense labor for extended periods. Yet one skeleton stood out. Embedded in the skull was a small iron implant that had fused perfectly with the surrounding bone. The precision of the insertion astonished the medical examiners. They described it as surgically exact, unlike anything known from the period implied by the site. When carbon dating results came back, the timeline shifted again. The bones were thousands of years older than the Roman era, older even than the earliest known civilizations of the Levant. The findings suggested that the workers had lived and died long before history began recording human settlement in the region. DNA tests deepened the mystery. The genetic markers did not match any known ancient population from Lebanon, Mesopotamia, or nearby cultures. According to one report, their genetic profile appeared isolated, as if they belonged to a lineage that had vanished completely. The excavation team grew uneasy as they pieced together the evidence. The arrangement of the bodies indicated a single catastrophic event. Rocks above them showed fractures, and the soil layers suggested that a collapse had sealed them instantly. It looked like the end had come without warning. Some scientists believed they were killed by a structural failure. Others whispered about something more, an accident involving forces the builders could not control. Whatever it was, it had ended their work in an instant. That night, the camp fell silent. Every theory led to the same impossible thought. Something had happened inside that quarry.
something powerful enough to kill instantly and leave no trace. And if the stones had been there when it happened, maybe they had witnessed it.
The stones that remember. At dawn, the scientists began testing the stones. If there had been an explosion, a collapse, or a release of pressure, the rock would have recorded it, just like a camera captures light. Samples were taken from the quarry and from the deepest sections of the temple's foundation. We don't know why Balbeck was chosen as this specific site. It may well be some kind of special power place. Everyone expected normal results. What they found instead changed everything. Under the microscope, the limestone looked wrong. Its surface wasn't chipped or weathered like ancient stone should be. It was smooth, glassy, and warped in places, as if it had been exposed to intense heat, hot enough to melt its outer layer. Some sections were fused together in thin, wave-like bands that no tool or chisel could have created. When the lead geologist reviewed the images, she said quietly, "These stones remember what happened here." The line spread through the team. It stopped being a figure of speech. It became the working theory. The next tests only deepened the mystery. When the samples were placed under observation, metal instruments began reacting strangely around them. Compasses drifted off true north. Small fragments of metal clung weakly to the rock as though drawn by static. At first, everyone blamed faulty equipment, but the readings repeated again and again. Somehow, the limestone was carrying a charge. There was no reasonable explanation. It should have been inert. Some of the engineers joked that the quarry must have been struck by lightning. Others stopped laughing when they realized that no lightning strike could have created patterns this precise or lasted this long. When researchers examined the cut faces of the megaliths under controlled light, another clue appeared. Each block showed faint parallel lines etched into its surface. The grooves were perfectly straight, all angled toward the temple's center. They were so fine and consistent that they looked more like the scoring left by a machine than by human tools. Over spans of 20 meters, the stone remained flat within fractions of a millimeter. The engineers were stunned. One technician whispered that even modern laser cutters would struggle to achieve that kind of precision on such a massive scale. To test the density of the blocks, the team used acoustic sensors. When sound waves were passed through the stone, the readings began to behave in ways no one expected. The signal echoed deep and rhythmic, resonating through the foundation like a low hum. Then something remarkable happened. The other blocks began to respond one after another, humming in harmony, as if the entire site had been tuned to a single note. The noise wasn't loud, but it was alive. One of the scientists later described it as the sound of the stones remembering what they were built to do. By the time the tests ended, a new theory had taken hold. The heat damage, the magnetism, the perfect geometry, the resonance, all of it pointed to one possibility. The stones were not just building material. They were components of a system designed to channel or contain energy that once moved through the site. If that was true, then the source of that energy had to be somewhere below. The scans showed a sealed cavity directly under the temple floor, a void large enough to hold an entire structure. The deeper sensors hinted at metal buried in the bedrock, but the signals were faint and incomplete. The only way to know for sure was to open it. And so, under the eyes of every major researcher on site, the team prepared to break the seal on a chamber that hadn't seen light in thousands of years.